Hello and welcome back to Koko Sleep, a new podcast of original children's bedtime stories and sleep meditations designed to make bedtime a dream. We've been reading some of your reviews, and I can't tell you how happy, pleased, and grateful I am to hear from you. In fact, all of us here at Sleep HQ, Koko included, are delighted to know you're tuning in before drifting off each night. So if you can, do write us a review to tell us what you like about our podcast, and we'll try to do more of it. You are in for a real treat this evening, as I'm going to read the third instalment of the Jupiter Twins series. We'll shortly return to the Leora Academy to hear all about Jake and Lily's first magic lesson. It's not any old lesson either. We'll hear how a magical orb transports them to a mystical land where their help is needed. To get in the mood, jump into bed and pull your covers up. Lie back. Relax your arms, hands, legs and feet, and close your eyes. Take a lovely deep breath in and listen to it as you slowly breathe it out. Once more, breathe in and slowly breathe out. Now it's time to completely relax as I read you The Magical Orb by Gillian Rogerson. Lily and Jake Jupiter had been at the Leora Academy for over a week. They'd learned about the history of the academy, explored the labyrinth of rooms and outdoor areas which made up the School of Magic, and had got to know their fellow students. But today was different. Today was the day they would be learning how to use magic, and not only that, they would be allowed to put their magical skills to the test. Their teacher was Mr. Daralundi, a faun who was known throughout the school for his love of music and dancing. He was also a fan of cheerful clothing, which explained his fondness for wearing brightly coloured, flamboyant suits. When Lily and Jake arrived at the classroom for their first magic lesson, Mr. Daralundi was already inside. Half man and half goat, the teacher was sitting behind his desk, playing a silver flute. He was wearing a suit in a kaleidoscope of colours, which gave the impression of him being hugged by a dozen rainbows. The sound coming from the flute was beautifully relaxing, and any anticipation the children might have had about their lesson was carried away with the melodic tune as it echoed around the room and out into the hallway. Mr. Daralundi continued playing the flute until the last pupil arrived and had taken their seat. He lowered the flute, smiled at the children, and said, "You will know from your timetables that today's lesson is all about magic and how to harness it. I could explain in words how this happens, but it's easier to show you. Watch carefully." He reached into a drawer beneath the desk and took out a small glass sphere. He gazed into it, a mild look of concentration on his face. A few seconds later, spiral wisps of gold and silver arose from the sphere and floated towards the board at the front of the classroom. The wisps settled on the surface and arranged themselves into elegantly curling words. Leaning forward a little, the children read the words. "The magic is within you." The children shared bewildered looks, not sure what the message meant. Mr. Darrelundy explained that the next part of the lesson would be outside. He stood up and focused his attention on the orb again. Very soon, more wisps floated outwards, this time in shades of green and brown. They floated around the room. The classroom walls began to fade. The wooden floor beneath the children's feet began to soften. Birdsong was faintly audible. A warm breeze drifted through the air. The classroom faded altogether. The children found themselves outside in a grassy glade. Warm rays of sun slanted through tall trees and cast dancing shadows across the ground. Mr. Darrelundy beckoned his students over to a tree which stood apart from the others. Its boughs were laden with vibrant green leaves. The teacher put the glass sphere in his pocket and took out a set of panpipes. He blew on them and released a soft melody into the air. A rustle of leaves caused the children to look closer at the tree. Tiny pink buds appeared on the ends of the branches. The buds unfurled to reveal delicate blossoms. A breeze picked up and swirled around the tree. The blossoms came free and floated through the air as gentle as snowflakes. Minuscule apples now appeared on the tree. Mr. Darrelundy stopped playing the pipes and told the children to stand beneath the branches and hold their hands out. The children did so and watched as the tiny apples increased in size and turned a delicate shade of green. One by one, the apples dropped into the waiting hands below. Lily and Jake received theirs at the same time. Their eyes widened as they watched the apples transforming into glass spheres, similar to the one Mr. Darrelundy had used. Lily said to her brother, "It fits my hand perfectly." Jake said his did too. The teacher explained these were magical orbs, and the children would need them to create magic. Jake asked how they should use the orbs. With a smile, Mr. Darrelundy explained all would be revealed in the second part of the lesson. "But," he said, "you must remember that imagination comes before magic, and your imagination is endless." In the blink of an eye, the children were back in the classroom. Mr. Darrelundy summoned a group of owls to escort the children out of the school and to watch over them during the next part of their lesson. A white, fluffy barn owl flew over to Lily and Jake and introduced himself as Sylvester. He asked the twins to follow him. He flew out of the classroom. The twins went after him. Minutes later, Jake, Lily, and their owl guardian left the school via one of the concealed entrances. The twins walked through the streets of Leeds with Sylvester flying at their side. The pedestrians around them didn't give Sylvester a second look, as if it were quite normal to see an owl during daylight hours. Sylvester led the children to the Corn Exchange, a circular building from the 19th century which had been designed as a place for merchants to sell their corn. The large domed roof was topped with glass panels which had allowed the merchants below to clearly see the quality of goods which were being sold and bought. Lily and Jake were somewhat surprised when the owl took them inside the building and down the steps which led to the lower area. The corn exchange had been converted into a retail area years ago and contained a wonderful array of boutique shops and a marvellous selection of cafes. The customers who were wandering around didn't pay any attention to the two children who were conversing with an owl. "What do we do now?" Jake asked Sylvester. "Are we going to use our orbs here?" "Yes," Sylvester answered. "But no one will see what you're about to do. I've cast an invisibility spell on us. Listen carefully, Lily and Jake. You are about to enter another world where your help will be needed there. All will be explained when you go through the sapphire door." The twins looked left and right, but couldn't see any such door. Sylvester asked Jake to hold his orb aloft. Jake did. Sylvester then asked Lily to do the same, but to stand in front of Jake so that the orbs were aligned. Lily did as she was asked. With orbs held high, the twins wondered what was going to happen next. Through the glass panels of the roof, a beam of sunlight streamed down and went straight into the orbs. A second later, a ray of blue light came out of the other side of the spheres and landed on a section of the wall in front of the twins. A glimmering sapphire door appeared. Sylvester directed the children towards the door and said he would stay where he was and wait for their return. As the twins walked away, the owl repeated Mr. Darrelundi's words about imagination coming before magic, and how their imaginations were endless. The puzzled look on Jake's face matched Lily's, but they didn't ask the owl to explain his words further. The twins gave Sylvester a friendly wave before walking through the sapphire door. On the other side was a large flower meadow, dotted with trees which swayed gently in the breeze. The scent of wild flowers filled the air. Jake and Lily took a moment to look around. At the far side of the meadow, they saw animals standing under the shade of trees. Other animals were strolling through the swaying grass, and a few were lying in the grass, basking in the pleasant warmth of the sun. Lily put her hand on Jake's arm and whispered, "Are those?" Jake could only nod, unable to take his eyes off the amazing animals. When he'd first seen them, he'd assumed they were horses, but upon looking closer, he could see that they were, in fact, unicorns. Unicorns of all colours. Light greens, deep, rich purples, shades of vibrant oranges, warm reds, and delicate pinks. The unicorns had a hazy shimmer about them, as though they'd been sprinkled with glitter. One of the unicorns approached them, her eyes full of kindness, and a soft smile on her face. Her skin was pale peach with a blonde mane flowing down her back. Threads of glittering silver twisted through her white horn, and a pair of silver-tipped wings laid folded over her back. With a bow of her head, she told them her name was Blythe, and that she and the other unicorns had been waiting for the children. "Have you brought your magical orbs with you?" Blythe asked. Rendered speechless in front of such a wondrous being, Lily and Jake silently held their orbs up. Blythe smiled and asked them to follow her. She turned around and headed through the meadow. Jake and Lily followed. Each unicorn they passed gave them a soft smile and a warm welcome wrapped around the twins like an invisible coat of comfort. Blythe took them out of the meadow and along a path lined with summer flowers. Lily and Jake kept hold of their magical orbs, not knowing when or how they would be needed, but wanted to be prepared just in case. They stopped at a shallow pool which shimmered with pale lilac water. A small waterfall of purple liquid tumbled over a series of indigo rocks. The noise of water bubbling over the stones was as light and joyful as a cheery song. Blythe invited the children to sit a while on a large rock whilst she explained why the unicorns needed their help. "This pool is where we unicorns bathe every evening. It's full of magic, and as we lie in the water, we absorb the magic. But every so often, the magic runs low and it needs replenishing, and that's where you two come in. Jake and Lily, we'd like you to fill your orbs with magic, and when that's done, we ask that you pour the magic into these waters. Is that something you could do for us, please?" Lily said, "We'd love to help, but we don't know how to use the orbs yet." Blythe told the twins they should use their imaginations to conjure up a magical scene. Once they had that scene in their thoughts, they should look upon the orb, and it would take those thoughts, add a touch of magic, and make them real. She said it sometimes takes a bit of practice to get it right, but she knew they were more than capable of performing such magic. "Would you like to give it a go?" Blythe asked. Lily and Jake said they absolutely would like to give it a go. They stood up and gazed intently into their orbs. With a soft laugh, Blythe said, "Not here, children. It needs to be somewhere that's special to you both. Somewhere that holds happy memories for you. The strongest magic always comes from a happy mind." She told them to walk back along the path and see where the journey led. The twins thought the path led back to the meadow because that's where they'd just come from. But they walked along it anyway. When they reached the end of the path, they were surprised to see the meadow had gone. In its place was a sign with words on it. "Think about your happy place, somewhere where smiles are aplenty and laughter abounds." They looked at each other and broke into laughter. They knew where to go. "To the beach," they said at the same time. Instantly, a sandy path appeared. The sound of waves washing on the shore filled the air. Tucking their orbs safely in their pockets, the twins ran along the path and onto a wide beach full of golden sand. They hastened towards the sea, kicked their shoes off, and let the water lap gently over their toes for a little while. "What do we do now?" Lily asked. Jake took the orb from his pocket. "We use magic. Do you remember when we went to a beach last year with Mum and Dad and we built that sandcastle? We both wished it was real because we wanted to go inside and explore it." Lily nodded, but asked her brother why he was talking about that. "I think we can make it happen. I think we can build a sandcastle and make it real by using our orbs." When Jake saw the unsure look on Lily's face, he added, "We can try, can't we? Maybe it's the kind of magic Blythe was talking about." Lily still wasn't convinced, but she followed Jake as he walked away from the sea and further up the beach. Jake gave the sand in front of him a studious look and said they would need tools. He looked into the glass surface of the orb and thought about the buckets and spades they would need to build a sandcastle. A tiny thread of bright yellow appeared inside the sphere. More threads appeared, each one bigger than the last. The yellow threads swirled around the orb like clothes in a washing machine. Then, very slowly, the strands of yellow came out of the orb and floated through the air before landing on the sand at their feet. Jake and Lily watched in astonishment as two bright yellow buckets and spades appeared on the sand. So astonished was Lily that she fell to the sand with a soft bump. "It works," she whispered. "You're magic." "So are you," Jake said. He helped her back to her feet. "We're at a magic school now, and we have to get used to this sort of thing." Lily took a moment to think about that. Her brother was right. It was time to get used to magic being an everyday occurrence. She looked at the buckets and spades and asked Jake if they should conjure up a sandcastle instead of building one. "But building one is much more fun," Jake said with a grin. Lily agreed, and before too long, a magnificent castle complete with turrets, a drawbridge, and a moat was standing proudly on the sand. It was Lily's turn to use magic. She cast her thoughts into the orb. Almost instantly, tendrils of brown and gold appeared. The wisps of colour left the orb and wrapped around the sandcastle. The sandcastle grew to the size of a large house. Jake laid a hand on the building and said it felt like it was made of stone and not sand. As tempted as they were to explore the inside of the castle, they were now eager to see what else they could produce with their orbs. They recalled their last visit to the beach and the amazing sand sculptures they'd seen, which had been created by gifted artists. Using their imaginations, they centered their thoughts on the magical orbs, and soon spectacular sand structures appeared all around them. Lily created a smaller version of the Eiffel Tower and watched in delight as it rose majestically from the sand. Jake produced a steam train which emitted small clouds of sandy dust. Together, they fashioned a tall lighthouse, which they then changed into a rocket ship. Not sure if it would work or not, they used their new skills to make the rocket zoom skywards before turning it around and returning it to the ground. The twins made a whole menagerie of animals appear: seahorses and starfish, dolphins and turtles, whales and sea urchins. Lily and Jake added beds of coral and rows of shells. They even managed to make kites which took to the sky, dipping and gliding on a gust of wind. The whole beach came alive with the imagination flowing from Jake and Lily, an imagination which was endless. After a while, the twins' thoughts returned to the unicorns. They wondered if enough magic had been created. Lily thought it had, and asked Jake how they were going to get it to the unicorns. Jake considered the matter and said, perhaps the magic needed to go back into the orbs, and maybe they should try to collect it from everything they'd created. It seemed as good an idea as any to Lily, so they decided to give it a try. They started with their first creation, the sandcastle, and held their orbs in front of it. The castle turned into tendrils of brown and gold threads, which encircled the orb before going inside. The twins collected more magic until the orbs were full of swirling, twirling colours. Using the path they'd taken earlier, the twins returned to the lilac pool where Blythe was waiting for them. The unicorn was delighted with how much magic they had collected and asked them to carefully put the orbs in the pool. Jake and Lily did, and then stood back to see what would happen. Colours flowed from the orb and into the water: golden browns, bright yellows, coral pinks, cobalt blues. A palette of beautiful colours swirled through the water, leaving a wash of colour behind them. Soon the colours faded, leaving only the original pale lilac shade behind. But the pool looked different now. It sparkled and twinkled in the sun, as though 1,000 tiny stars lay on the surface of the water. The magical orbs came out of the water and flew back to Jake and Lily. The twins held out their hands and the orbs came to rest in their palms. Blythe thanked them for their help. Then she told them she was big enough to carry both of them and wondered if they would like a lift back to their world. There was only one answer to that. Blythe lowered her back to allow the twins to climb on. A plait of blonde mane appeared and wrapped itself gently around the twins like an enchanted seat belt. Blythe became airborne, and the twins once again became speechless as they flew over snow-capped mountains and through lush green valleys. All too soon, they were flying over the streets of Leeds and towards the corn exchange. Using her magic, the flying unicorn cast a spell on the glass roof of the building, and it opened like doors on a jewellery box. She flew through the opening and landed on the ground floor where Sylvester, the owl, was waiting for them. Blythe thanked the twins once more before taking to the skies, closing the roof of the corn exchange behind her. Jake and Lily were full of tales about their adventure and talked non-stop to Sylvester as they walked back to the Leora Academy. With a wise look on his face, the owl said, "This is only the beginning. Just as there's no limit to your imaginations, there is no limit to the magic you can create." Those wise words came back to the twins as they snuggled down under the soft blankets in their cosy beds that night. Their dreams were full of the magic they had created that day, and the magic which was yet to come.